Bhutan, the country they call the Last Shangri-La, the only state on earth that measures national progress not by GDP, but by gross national happiness. But behind this beautiful idea lies a history full of things the tourist brochures keep quiet about. There is a fortress that, to this day, every future king must pass through before his coronation. There is a 15th century blacksmith, self-taught, who dived into a mountain lake holding a burning lamp and surfaced with treasures, the lamp still alight. Today, the great secrets of Bhutan. Central Bhutan, a mountain chain where the ridges squeeze the country into a narrow strip. On the edge of a cliff above the Mangde Chu River stands an enormous fortress, looming over the gorge. Mist rises from below and, at times, swallows the lower floors entirely, so that the upper courtyards seem to float in the air. Trongsa Dzong, the neck of the dragon, that is what this place is called. It is here that the country narrows so sharply that the only road linking western and eastern Bhutan once ran straight through the fortress courtyard. Whoever controlled Trongsa controlled the whole country. It was from here that, in the 19th century, the Wangchuck family effectively ruled Bhutan, even before it became the official monarchy. The first fortification on this spot appeared in 1543. According to legend, the founder, Ngagi Wangchuck, found hoofprints on the rock left by the horse of the guardian goddess Palden Lamo, and judged the place to be sacred. The present fortress was built in 1647 under Jabdrung Ngawang Namgyal, later extended in the 18th century, damaged by the earthquake of 1897 and restored by the first and second kings. The first two kings of Bhutan ruled the country from right here, not from Thimphu, from this fortress above the gorge. The tradition holds to this day. Every heir to the throne must be formally appointed Trongsa Penlop, governor of Trongsa, in this very fortress. The current fifth king, Jigme Kesa Namgyel Wangchuck, became the 16th Trongsa Penlop on the 31st of October 2004, in the main courtyard of the fortress. Only after that was he crowned king in 2006. Above the fortress rises the cylindrical Ta Zong Tower, built in 1652. Since 2008, it has housed the Royal Heritage Museum, opened for the centenary of Bhutan's monarchy. Within the fortress, there are 25 separate temples and 7 successive courtyards. About 200 monks live here all year round. The Tang Valley, Bumthang, central Bhutan. At the place where the Tangchu River widens, the water is dark and deep. Above the banks, colored prayer flags. On the stones, butter lamps. This is Mebar Tso, the burning lake. In 1475, a blacksmith named Pema Lingpa was working in the Tang Valley. He was about 27 years old. He had taught himself to read. One night, a monk appeared to him in a vision and gave an instruction to come to a rock above the river at the full moon with 5 companions. Pema Lingpa came, leapt into the water, and, by his own account, found in an underwater cave texts that had been hidden by Guru Rinpoche. When he returned with the manuscripts, the valley's governor, Thupa Chokor, declared him an impostor. So Pema Lingpa proposed a test. Before the crowd gathered on the bank, he lit a butter lamp, took it in his hand, and declared, "If I am a true revealer of treasures, I will return with treasure and with the lamp still burning. If I am an impostor, let me drown." And he leapt. A long time passed. The crowd grew uneasy. He surfaced. In his hands, a statuette of Guru Rinpoche, a casket of relics, and a scroll. The butter lamp was still burning. From that day, the place has been called Mebar Tso, the burning lake. Pema Lingpa became the most revered spiritual figure in Bhutan's history. He revealed 32 sacred treasures in his lifetime and founded Tamsheng Monastery in 1501. His descendants entered the royal Wangchuck family, the dynasty that rules Bhutan to this day. The present Gangtang Rinpoche is the 9th reincarnation of Pema Lingpa. Pema Lingpa died in 1521 at the age of 71. On the shore of Mebar Tso stand an altar, prayer flags, and a niche of lamps. The 7th century AD, the Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo received alarming news from his advisors. across the whole span of the Himalayas lay the body of a giant demoness. Her presence was blocking the spread of Buddhism. The king ordered 108 temples to be built in the year 659 AD. Over the demoness's heart in Lhasa, they raised the Dzong. Over her left knee, in the Bumthang Valley of Bhutan, Jambay Lhakhang. Over her left foot, in the Paro Valley, Kyichu Lhakhang. Both Bhutanese temples still stand. Both are more than 1,350 years old. Jambay Lhakhang, single story by the road in Bumthang. Inside is a main hall with a giant statue of Maitreya, the Buddha to come, and paintings that successive generations of masters have restored across 13 centuries. The first king of Bhutan, Ugyen Wangchuck, installed here the Du Ki Korlo, the Wheel of Time, in honor of his victory over his rivals in 1885. Every autumn, the Jambay Lhakhang Drup Festival is held here. One part of it is the Tercham, the naked dance. 16 men, chosen by the monks and the village elders, dance around the temple in the dead of night. According to legend, the ritual goes back to the 8th century, when evil spirits were hindering the building work. The ritual is attested in the sources and continues to this day. Kyichu Lhakhang in the Paro Valley, built on the same body map of the demoness. It is regarded as one of the oldest functioning religious buildings in the country. Beside it grow 2 orange trees, which, according to legend, bear fruit all year round with no seasonal break. 4 valleys in central Bhutan, Chume, Chokor, Tang, and Ura. Together they form the region of Bumthang, the beautiful flat field in translation. In the Chokor Valley, in the 8th century, an event took place that set the course of Bhutan's entire spiritual history. The local king, Sindhu Raja, fell gravely ill. A higher being, Shelgin Kapo, had stolen his life force. Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, was invited from Tibet. According to legend, he took the form of a Garuda and defeated Shelgin Kapo in single combat. The king's life force returned. Sindhu Raja embraced Buddhism. In the Kurje cave, where Guru Rinpoche meditated, an imprint of his body was left in the rock. Kurje means precisely body imprint. The Trongsa Dzong monastery, raised over this cave in 1652, still stands. Between its 3 buildings grows a living cypress, sprung, according to legend, from Guru Rinpoche's staff. Bumthang is the place with the highest concentration of sacred sites per square kilometer in all of Bhutan, more than 40 monasteries and temples across the 4 valleys. Tongshing Monastery, founded by Pema Lingpa in 1501, holds frescoes painted more than 500 years ago and never once restored. Yakte Monastery, from the 14th century, is a quiet place well off the tourist routes. Historically, the only path between western and eastern Bhutan ran literally through the inner courtyards of Trongsa Dzong. That meant any trader, pilgrim, or messenger moving across the country physically ended up inside the governor's residence. Whoever controls Trongsa controls Bhutan. This saying was a literal description of the situation for several centuries. The Trongsa Penlop could cut off movement across the entire country simply by locking the gates of his palace. When, in the early 20th century, the Wangchuck family began to unite Bhutan, confirmation in the office of Trongsa Penlop became the key step. The first king, Ugyen Wangchuck, was Trongsa Penlop before his coronation on the 17th of December, 1907. So was his son, Jigme Wangchuck. So was his grandson, Jigme Dorji Wangchuck. And so it remains to this day. The office of Trongsa Penlop was formally established by Zhabdrung Ngawang Namgyal in 1647. Since then, 4 centuries, not one monarch has ascended the throne of Bhutan without passing through the courtyard of this fortress. April 1998. Early one morning, smoke rose over the Paro Valley. Taktsang, the tiger's nest, was burning. The monastery clings to a sheer cliff 900 meters above the valley. There are no roads to it. Fire engines cannot reach it. Helicopters cannot land. The whole Paro Valley stood below and watched the monastery burn, powerless to do anything. The cause of the fire was an overheated butter lamp. The monastery had been built in 1692 by Gyaltse Tenzin Rabje, around the cave where Guru Rinpoche meditated in the 8th century. Over 3 centuries, it had accumulated 17th century tankas, gilded statues, and handwritten texts in classical Dzongkha, the only copies in existence. All of it was in active liturgical use, not in a museum, but in the hands of monks during daily rituals. Everything burned. One monk died. When dawn came, all that remained of the monastery were charred walls on the cliff. The loss was national. Bhutan is a country with fewer than 800,000 people, and Taktsang is its spiritual heart. The restoration became a matter of state. Everything was carried up by hand along the steep path. The builders worked in the same conditions in which their predecessors had raised the monastery in 1692, without machinery, on a sheer cliff. The new monastery was consecrated on the 24th of March, 2005. The consecration was performed by a boy recognized as the reincarnation of Gyaltse Tenzin Rabgye, the man who had built the monastery 3 centuries earlier. The upper Paro Valley, charred stone walls overgrown with scrub, collapsed floors. Inside, nothing but sky. Drukgyal Dzong, the victorious fortress of the Druk. The fortress was raised in 1649 by the first Zhabdrung, Nawang Namgyal, to mark the repelling of the Tibetan invasion of 1644 to 1648. Inside was an ingenious system of defense, a false entrance through which an enemy would be led into a trap. There was only one real entrance. A system of underground tunnels ran between the buildings. In 1951, the fortress burned down in a fire. The charred walls remained standing. On the 100 in Gultram banknote from 1986 to 2006, there was an image of the fortress intact, based on a historical photograph from the early 20th century. In 2016, the government of Bhutan announced the start of Drukgyal Dzong's restoration. The work is underway. Completion is planned for the late 2020s to early 2030s. The site is on UNESCO's tentative list, one of several Bhutanese sites awaiting formal inscription on the World Heritage List. 1972. The 4th king of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchuck, who had only just turned 17, inherited the throne after the sudden death of his father.
Asked by a journalist about the country's GDP, the young monarch replied with a phrase that would later travel the world.
Gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. It became a state philosophy, a concept studied at Harvard, the London School of Economics, and Oxford. Bhutan is the only country in the world that has officially abandoned GDP as its principal measure of progress. 4 equal pillars: sustainable economic development, conservation of the natural environment, protection of cultural values, and good governance. In practice, this means concrete decisions. Forests cover more than 70% of the country's territory. This is written into the Constitution of 2008. The export of timber is banned. Plastic bags have been banned since 1999. Television and the internet arrived in Bhutan only in 1999. The government deliberately managed that transition. The flow of tourists is limited by a high-value, low-volume policy. Before the reform of 2022, every foreign tourist paid $250 a day as a tourism levy, part of which went to health and education funds. After the reform, the levy was set at $100 a day. Bhutan itself is far from first on the United Nations Happiness Index. Its own officials acknowledge this. GNH is not a claim that everyone here is happy. It is a framework for making decisions. But it is precisely this framework that has led to a country of fewer than 800,000 people being discussed again and again at the United Nations as a possible model for rethinking global priorities. Bhutan is not Shangri-La. It is a real country with real contradictions, a real history and real secrets. A fortress every future king is bound to pass through. A blacksmith who dived into a river with a burning lamp and surfaced with treasures. A monastery on a cliff that burned before the eyes of the whole country. A concept of happiness raised into a state philosophy. It is a place where history and legend are not kept apart, and that is exactly what makes it like nowhere else. Thank you for watching. Discover the world with us.